Hello everyone, things are gonna get a little more complicated today, and I'm gonna show you why, because we're running the Beetle PSX Xtreme Core, and I'm doing a tutorial on how to run Night Raid, a great Takumi SHMUP. The moment you load a game, no matter what game it is on this specific core, here's how you need to do it. You're gonna go into quick menu options. The moment you load a game, you're gonna want to make sure that the CPU direct is off, and the CPU scale and reverse overclock is at 100% default, and the CPU direct delay is at 128 default. You need these three options this exact same way in order to be able to take advantage of the timing parameters that I did for video, audio, and all that jazz, whatnot. Once we have these three options set to off, 100, 128, we're going to go back to resume and let the game load to the point where it's in game. You don't want to change anything until it's in game. And there are many games that do not run well on PCSX ReArmed, Neon, and such that are going to benefit from the usage of this specific core. So we're waiting for the Takumi thing to come up on here right now. And I have this loaded into memory, actually. You could actually go to load asynchronous, synchronous, or pre-cache. But pre-cache only works on some games. If you try using it like on a game like Judge, Dredd, etc., it's going to crash the game. So just leave it at default unless you really know what you're getting into. But right now, we're going to get into the game. You're going to see that it sounds really slow right now. This is pretty much what you've encountered if you try loading the Beetle PSX Core in the past. It's more beneficial to run this on Android or, of course, like PC. But I did what I could to get this boosted, just like I did with the Ludicrous Xtreme Core. Let's get in-game here. Again, you want to be off 100, 128. And it shows a little bit of a tutorial, kind of like Neo Geo games, all that fun stuff. And then once we're in game and you see the awesomeness, we're going to talk about some of the latest things I've watched on streaming services and such. But here we go. We're going to have this thing right here. And it's pretty much unbearable to play right now. And some of you have seen my videos and like, how the hell did he pull that off? I'm going to show you right now. Let's get a couple enemies here and just see, like, it's literally unbearable. Music is awful. But I did what I could to boost this ludicrous extreme style. Okay, we're going to go into core options again. And like I said, you're going to have games like Judge Dredd, the WWF In Your House. I'm going to keep calling it WWE In Your House because that's pretty much what it predominantly is nowadays. But quick menu options. And you're going to go to CPU direct and turn it on. You're going to go to CPU scale and reverse overclock. And I have some presets on here. We're going to go to 19 for Night Raid. And if you want to run like a game like Giant Bazookatone, you want it at 25. If you want to run WWF In Your House, at 30. For right now, we're leaving it at 19. And then here's the very special thing. This is similar to like DMA checks and such, where it actually will update your system. It'll literally freeze. Think of like a speed bump on the road. Every time it checks, it could slow down and bug your game. Like ESPN Extreme Sports is a game on PS1 that has issue like this. But what I'm doing right now is I made it, I took it up to this, and this is the exact number I'm able to get away with. If I try doing anything other than this, it'll literally freeze or crash the game. But when we're done with this, we can go back to default. We're going to off, push and start, and this is what you want when you exit the core. But now that we're actually in game and we're able to do this, we're going to 19, and we're going to the 99s. And we're going to go to right here, quick menu, and watch what happens. 3, 2, 1, contact. Now it's actually quite playable. And yes, you can play the game from beginning to end. Awesome stuff there. You don't need to worry about having Duck Station, which unfortunately only goes in software mode on the minis. So it really runs about 60% speed. Unfortunately, but it is great on the Retropie 4 if you have that, or PC or Android. But for right here, we have the Beetle PSX Xtreme Core, which I worked into the time and parameters for video, audio, to get it as good as I can run, considering. But very fun to play here, regardless. But I watched the latest Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the director that actually also did a movie I saw several years back called Bloodfest, which I really liked. It's basically about a bunch of horror fanatics who go to a horror festival, but they find out that the horror festival is realer than they wanted to be or realize. And at the time, like, think of movies like Armageddon and Independence Day. Should we say better example? Armageddon and Deep Impact. These are two movies that are very similar in plot. And these are both in the theater. But in the case of like Bloodfest, that was a direct-to-video, on-demand movie. Whereas Hellfest, a very similar in concept movie, was theatrical. But in this case, I found that the superior movie of the two was actually Bloodfest. But if you like Bloodfest at all, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is worth watching, at least for the gore, violence, and mayhem. And then here's an interesting thing that many of you don't even take into account. It's kind of taken for granted here, is that when you have a movie in the theater, I mean, just look at how many years it took Ryan Reynolds to get a movie like Deadpool off the ground with an R rated. I mean, just imagine Deadpool with PG or PG-13. It would have been a joke, a travesty. But in any case, when you're on Netflix and such, you can get away with having like NC-17 content because the ratings board is less adamant about having these strict ratings when they're on a streaming service. I mean, but in the theater, on the other hand, you gotta push for that R rating or less in order to have the rating, the ratings board allow it. I mean, we don't want to have a movie like NC-17, which is what Orgasmo got. That's why it was such a limited release in the theater when it came out. I mean, I could find no theater in the vicinity that had it. And at the time, I didn't have a credit card, and I really, really want to rent the movie. I went to the video store, just told the person there that I'm a big, big fan of Trey Parker and Matt Stone, and I really wanted to watch that movie. I didn't have a credit card. They let me rent it, and I just watched it, and I've watched it so many times since. Such a fun movie. I like basketball as well. I mean, I've seen each and every move they've done in the theater. Team America played for some crazy stuff there. But verging on the NC-17 thing, one time I was on Netflix within the last year or so, and they happen to have Nymphomaniac Volume 1 and 2 on there, which is definitively NC-17 because it is like verging on adult fare with penetration and everything. And I'm talking like Netflix should have been aware of this when they put this on there because it is not Netflix material. But since then, they've removed it as far as I'm concerned. I mean, maybe if you use a VPN, it might be available in other countries. But it definitely got removed from the United States one. But Lars von Trier did the movie, and he also did House That Jack Built. And as far as VPN is concerned as well, you might notice that it's on like Amazon Prime in like UK at one point, but it was removed from the United States because it is pretty vulgar material. When I first watched the movie with Matt Dillon, a few years ago, it was actually the censored version. And when you're watching it, you know exactly what parts are censored and which parts are not, as far as like the final product. But the movie starts out like with an interesting scene with Uma Thurman and Matt Dillon, and I'm not going to say much more than that, but once you watch the movie, if you can handle like a more vulgar movie, it's pretty crazy out there. And some of the violence, like I said, is on par with like Bloodfest and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And they're calling it like kind of like a continuation of the original series, but they ignore all other sequels. I kind of wish they wouldn't have done that because it really, the last two Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies I actually enjoyed. Like one inherits the house and she goes there and all kinds of crazy stuff happens. And then of course there's the movie simply called Leatherface, which is supposed to be the origin of Leatherface. And you're watching the movie, it almost feels like a weird cross between like Devil's Rejects and Stand By Me. Yes, those two weird movies. It's kind of interesting in nature. But as it is, I found Leatherface interesting, especially when you finally get the revelation of who Leatherface actually is. I mean, you take guesses at it, almost like watching a Clue movie horror version. And yes, Clue's an interesting game. I've never played the board game, but I've watched the movie multiple times over the years, and it's always been an interesting movie. And I have a feeling they're going to end up remaking it at some point. I mean, the closest thing to it was that mystery movie that came out last year. Do you know what movie I'm talking about? It was a fun movie. See if any of you know what I'm talking about, you movie aficionados. But today I'm probably going to be watching Uncharted in the theater. And I'm going to go into a little bit of a spoiler alert here, which I think is really interesting. It's going to be maybe a 30-second spoiler alert, so don't listen for 30 seconds if you don't hear what I'm talking about. Originally, Tom Cruise was supposed to be Iron Man, but it ended up going off into the vicinity of Robert Downey Jr. instead. But lo and behold, here's the real spoiler alert. There's a rumor now that in the multiverse for Doctor Strange 2, that is actually going to be Tom Cruise playing the Tony Stark, classic vintage comic book Tony Stark in the multiverse. And I have a feeling that many other people are going to show up like Deadpool and Wolverine. It might even have like Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Maybe even like Wesley Snipes. Boy, that'd be so damn awesome to have just all this shenanigans there. But in the case of like Sully, who was played by Mark Wahlberg in the latest Uncharted movie, about 10 years ago, I mean, just like Tomb Raider and Uncharted, many of these movies take decades to get off the ground. They were supposed to have Mark Wahlberg play the original Uncharted. Just imagine how things would have been if we got Uncharted 10 years ago with Mark Wahlberg playing him. And it's kind of interesting because these people, the actors in the movie, are all talking about how physically grueling the movie was. And I just wasted a power up there. But Mark Wahlberg said he had it easy. He has like a bar fight and such. But someone like Tom Holland said it was actually more difficult to do in film than it was even Spider-Man. So I'm looking very, very forward to seeing this. Almost like watching Death Proof with like Kurt Russell. You know, that great movie from that Grindhouse film. You can definitely tell some of them stunts were physically grueling. I mean, what movies have you ever seen where you know the stunts are physically grueling? I mean, obviously we got Mission Impossible Tom Cruise, where he runs off the rooftop, and you see that he definitely messes his ankle pretty badly up. So, I mean, very, very interesting stuff indeed. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, my overall opinion of the movie is there's not much substance to it. It really doesn't offer much to the overall storyline. I mean, you'd be better off just going back to like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 with Dennis Hopper. I mean, was it 2 or 3 with Dennis Hopper? But that actually was a very, very interesting movie. The new one has no plot or substance. You really don't like any of the characters at all. And but the violence and mayhem and gore is actually pretty damn interesting as far as what they pull off. It kind of reminds me of that Vince Vaughn movie, the Cell Block movie. And that is a great movie too. I mean, Cell Block, what was it, 99? Agent 99, Get Smart, all that fun stuff. And speaking of like the Get Smart remake, remember Steve Carell was in that? I finally got around to watching some Office. I mean, I've seen some of the UK Office. But people have told me that the season 2 and on of Office for the United States is better. I mean, some shows just take a few episodes to get off the ground. Like watching Seinfeld season 1, Kramer doesn't really come through the door tour de force as you'd expect it, like later on season. So when I first watched Seinfeld, I didn't think much of it. But when my friend's grandmother was in the hospital one time, they had Seinfeld playing on there, and it was the episode when they were in the parking garage trying to find their car, and Elaine had the goldfish in the bag and such. That ended up really hooking me on the show, and just like South Park and Seinfeld, you just have to find an episode that people can relate to that makes them worth watching. I mean, so many funny things. Like for South Park, I mean, anybody who understands Facebook, they probably get a kick out of the Facebook episode, which kind of crosses over and verges with Tron. But it also verges with that Unfriended movie, and Unfriended, the movie is basically somebody kind of feels sympathetic to somebody who's new at the school, adds her on Facebook, whatever the social media services, but then other people start removing her from their friend list, and then she takes the friend off her list, and then this person takes it personally, and then all hell breaks loose. And then Unfriended 2 has absolutely nothing to do with Unfriended Part 1. It's more like Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, compared to, and even Season of the Witch with Nicolas Cage is a fun movie, different thing entirely, but Season of the Witch, the Halloween movie, Part 3, has nothing to do with the Michael Myers fair. Even other than like a little bit of an homage Easter egg in that movie. But in any case, very, very interesting stuff indeed. If you ever watch like a sequel that has nothing to do with the rest of the series, I mean, let's talk about Highlander 1 and then Highlander 2 The Quickening. Highlander 2 The Quickening was removed from canon, even though it's still, I mean, because I'm a hardcore Highlander fan, TV series, all that stuff, I still enjoyed the movie, considering. I mean, Sean Connery is pretty much fun to watch in anything he's in. I mean, especially Dragonheart. But in any case, like I said, let me know any movies that you've ever seen where there's part of the series that really doesn't fit with the rest of the series. I mean, almost like they keep doing this thing like with Scream and Halloween, where they like to just, rather than have like Halloween 10 and all that, like just like they call it the same as the original. And they make fun of this in the latest Scream movie too, where they call the new ones the originals and originals new ones and all that. It gets really crazy. And AVGN did a video where he actually talks about sequel mayhem. It's just so interesting. And I guess if we're talking about Die Hard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all that, didn't they just call like Die Hard 5 Die Hard? I mean, I can't remember if they actually had 5 in the title and all that. And then of course we have Rambo, and then we have Rambo 2 First Blood. But if it's the First Blood, how's it Part 2? It gets really, really crazy. And then you talk about like a specific Jackie Chan movie, the Gods movie that he did. Part 2 came out in the United States before Part 1, and then Part 1 came out after, and it really threw me out. But there's one part where he's fighting in an aircraft hangar. It is absolutely amazing, where you have like the wind of the jet stream basically throwing him and the enemy around while they're fighting. It is really, really cool stuff. And I've always enjoyed the Jackie Chan movies. And you might actually remember, like, that he actually used to be part of, he used to sing. I mean, you can actually see him singing in some movies. I'm not sure if I remember this correctly, but it was either, like, Cannonball Run, or it might have been Police Academy 4, where the end credits scene, literally had Jackie Chan singing the song there. It kind of threw me off at the time, because I didn't know who Jackie Chan was at the time, and too much later on. But you watch, like, Enter the Dragon, Jackie Chan is basically a stunt double there. But going back to, like, Kung Fu, the video game, the arcade game, the NES game, Jackie Chan is actually who the game is supposed to be based off. You know, the Meals on Wheels movie. What was the movie called? Why am I saying Meals on Wheels? The Wheels movie. But Benny was a great battle within the context of that movie. I mean, such a fast thing. I don't know what they were doing with the camera, but sometimes you have, like, people like Jackie Chan on camera where they try recording their motions, and they're so fast that they have trouble recording their motion. We're talking about, like, Jet Li, even Brandon Lee. Brandon Lee was great in some of his movies. Let's continue. I'm going to use my power up there. Bam! But yes, Jet Li was fun in some movies. I loved his Americanization. Once he finally showed up in, it was Lethal Weapon 4 was the very first movie I've ever seen with him in the United States. And then after that, he took off the ground with, like, many other movies, like Jet Li's The One and all that fun stuff. But Iron Monkey was a fun movie as well. And I happened to rent that movie at a video store. And then roughly 6 or 7 years later, it showed up in the theater. I'm like, is this how it is? Sometimes you have actors that are lesser known. And then when they finally take off the ground, they take advantage of that. We're talking about, like, Cabin in the Woods with Chris Hemsworth. That movie was just sitting on the shelf. They might have never even released it, and then he became biggest star in the Avengers and such, so they released it. But in any case, hope you enjoyed the video. There'll be more to come. And before you exit, you need to go into quick menu options. Now, add it to my favorites for next time. Turn this off. Push start, and you're good. Off 100, 128. You can actually exit the game, and you're good to go. And I'm going to do another tutorial on how to run WWF in your house.